to a new episode of the brand called You. We have brought some fairly iconic individuals, and today we have Rajeev Karwal, who is quite an experienced and accomplished entrepreneur and professional. Rajeev, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley.
Rajeev is the founder and chairman of Milagrow India. He worked for LG, Onida, Philips, and Electrolux. He's a much recognized individual, the most powerful CEO award, 25 Hot Young Stars, Stars of the Millennium, the A&M Indian Marketing Person of the Year, president of CEAMA, and he's also an author like me of corporate blogging in India. Rajeev, fantastic to have you on the show.
Thank you.
You've been a very successful professional manager and a very successful entrepreneur. Tell us about first the early part of your corporate life.
You see, I started off in 1984, and it was a time when there were not too many opportunities which used to come for MBAs and professionals, and in fact, I was the first one to get placed from my institute, which was the Institute of Management Technology, and the job was from Anand Bazar Patrika for being a space seller, and that industry was doing well, advertising and marketing. But I never wanted to be a space seller, and at that time I did a little bit of reading, and I said and I think this advice also would be very useful for the students who are passing out, or doing their MBAs and joining the workforce now, is that I should not get into an industry where there is going to be probably less disruption or the growth is going to be steady.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked around and I found that Indira Gandhi had announced, or the government of the day had announced in the fifth five-year plan that they'll cover 72% of Indian population with color television, signal. And I said, this industry is definitely going to grow.
Yeah.
And there were so many, brands, Dianora, Cellora, Beltec, JKTV, and thousands of brands. And then I started to look around and I found this one small company called Onida, which was in a DSIDC shed in Okla, 750 square feet. But when I went inside and I saw the technology which they were bringing from JVC of Japan, and I looked at what they were trying to do in terms of building a brand, where I could put my skills or what I had learned from Kotler's piece or things like that, to use. And I joined that organization.
So
So
were
not
you
only
behind-
an industry which was growing,
Yeah.
but also a company within that industry which was coming up with disruptive technology and with a long-term intent.
So were you behind that famous line, neighbors envy, owners pride?
No, I wasn't directly behind it, but yes, I was.
That changed
one
the
of
face of
yeah,
Onida.
Yeah. Advertising avenues at that point in time, Gautam Rakshit and Gopi Kukre, these were the guys who made that campaign, and it took a quite amount of convincing to our team as well as the head office to back that strategy, and it worked wonders.
You can imagine how
Yeah.
powerful a line it is. I remember it even today.
Oh yes, and also the devil, which signified jealousy.
Yeah.
It was a personification of
Correct.
that envy,
Correct.
and people didn't understand it, but definitely it got us the eyeballs and got us going
That's
in terms
fascinating.
of brand building.
And then you moved to Philips.
No, after Onida, I went abroad
Okay.
for about 4 years. It was an Indian, transnational, working in the entire Europe. I was based at Spain, and then came back and then joined LG
Okay.
Electronics. And LG had entered India 2 or 3 times earlier, wasn't really successful. So I was there at LG. It was a successful stint, and some of the recognitions which you mentioned were actually, from during the LG stint, and then from LG I moved on to Philips.
So as you climbed the corporate ladder, what were some of the key challenges?
You see, in my first stint, I was very young, and the organization which I was working for was also very young. It was kind of a startup, and one got to got the opportunity to do a lot of things. And even today, when I look back, the kind of grilling and the kind of hard work which I had to do, or the exposure which I got during my first stint, is where I draw my lessons from,
Sure.
or so one got a lot of opportunity, and also got a lot of delegation and empowerment, and combined with the ownership mentality which I had at that point in time, I became the professional in the later years, because of the Onida opportunity. But within Onida, once it started to grow, I realized that when external people came, I was very young. I was the first MBA to join. They were above me. The ownership mentality which I had made me do certain things which could have rubbed my bosses in the wrong way, because they were, coming from either Murphy or Philips at that point in time, and they were established organizations, and here was a company, Onida, which kind of came from behind and stole the, thunder in the color television market. So, but anyway, ownership is one aspect amongst professionals which even today, is missing by and large, especially in the junior levels and the middle level and the senior middle level management. If we had that in this part of the management, that organization would be extremely strong. And as I moved up the ladder, I realized that for me, ethics also was very important part of management and growing up. And ethics not just in the way you do things, but also financial, moral, in its entirety. And it is that realization and working on it over a period of time that finally made me launch my own venture, Milagro, in 2007.
So let's move on to Milagro. You have developed Milagro into a fairly interesting organization. And I see you focused on robotics. Tell us a little bit about what your focus is.
Yeah, you see, okay, I'll take a step back, and once I left Reliance Digital in 2006, at that time I thought that I will spend more time in consulting, all my learning. I would try to contribute towards the growth of the Indian MSME sector. So 2007 till 2011 we actually focused there, but realized that the noble objectives which you have, or the patriotic feelings which you have, or the idealism which you have in you, is not really enough to change the fortunes in this sector. Because whether the MSMEs are exploiting the system or they are the exploited, there's a very thin line. When it started, who started it, one doesn't know, but it's a very big challenge. And the way the Indian industry or the Indian ecosystem is structured,
Right.
it is very difficult to say that. So at that point in time, when I was not really getting the satisfaction, I decided that okay, I'm by nature someone who would like to have excellence in execution. I am by nature, and a person who would not like to cut corners to grow. So, which is the industry which will give me that opportunity and satisfaction of self-realization or actualization also? So, I identified robots, because all the software development which is happening, whether it is AI or deep learning or AR or IoT, virtual reality, everything can be showcased the best in a robotic body which moves around like a human being.
Okay.
A smart television is static. It is, put in a
On the
particular
wall.
place,
Yeah.
and it is like a tree. Tree is also a living being, but the moment you ask a tree to move, it will be impossible for it to move. Same way, It is the smart television. So, and the mobile which you find in your pocket is actually a baby in your lap. A robot is an individual which has started to walk and slowly will grow, and the technology will also grow. And when I looked around myself, I found that there's hardly any worldwide brand in robotics, and robotics is something which will actually enter into every aspect of our living, and it's an industry which has a growth potential for the next 100 years. And I said, when I looked around and I said, okay, maybe an LG, Samsung,
Yeah.
Philips also at certain point in time would have started very small, but they had a very good runway which was visible to them. So robotics is one thing which I identified, which where I could do things with the value system which I wanted to follow, and which gave me a even sometimes I grow slow in 2 years if I have to rebuild something which I have not built in a proper way. It doesn't matter. So it gave you a chance to experiment, rebuild, build until the time you got it correct, and then grow in a faster way.
Right. And just to take up from what you just commented about ethics in business and about the need for excellence,
Yeah.
I'm sure robots have no issue on ethics and no issues on not doing something excellently every time.
You see, there is so much which is happening on the robotics field that the industrial workers and the industry 4.0 which we talk about, of course they will not require to eat, they will not require a sick leave or things like that, and the productivity will go up. But there is already a growing movement across the globe where they're saying, and rightly so, that if a robot is taking a human job, right, and is performing the human tasks, and if the humans were held accountable to the performance, so should be the robot held to its performance, and should be accountable for good performance, bad performance.
Really? Okay.
And robots, as they also enter into the domain of expressions and deep learning and other cognitive abilities, would start to imitate the actions of humans. And that is where a robot as a citizen, would the constitution recognize them as citizens, and how this thing will develop over the next
Correct.
few decades is
Correct.
something which we will all watch. But
So
there has been interesting movies in
It was
Hollywood.
fascinating
Yeah,
because
yeah.
about 3 or 4 months ago, I got an opportunity to interact with the famous Sophie the robot.
Yeah, okay.
She was visiting Delhi.
Yeah.
I got a chance to chat with her.
Yes.
And she's lifelike. I think she's just been given citizenship of South Korea, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yes.
And I remember someone asked her this
Saudi
question-
Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, okay.
Yeah.
And someone asked her the question that, what shouldn't we do with you? And she said,
Yeah.
just keep me away from water. That was the only thing she said.
Yeah. You see, those are. I would say still the development is in its infancy, and it's basically recalling what is fed at the back end, and then giving you responses. But it is the empathy, and I wrote about it last week, that empathy and compassion. Compassion can also be kind of imitated with certain patterns, but empathy is a feeling which is human. What am I saying? If there is a tear which is swelling up inside me, which is still not reached my eyes, is something which you will be able to understand as a human, and a robot will find it almost impossible to replicate that feeling inside, which is making a tear swell up. I think there will be the biggest challenge of robotics to become almost like human. So I said that that robots can almost be like human, but never be completely human.
Correct.
And neither can humans be completely like robots. They can attempt to be robots, but for short periods of time.
So, what is happening with robotics in India? I mean, are these getting more accepted in industry, or is there a pushback in terms of robots will take over my job?
Okay. So two parts. One is the acceptance by the ordinary, individuals in their residences. Second is by the industry, and maybe let's add the third dimension, which is the government and how it is seeing. Uh, in the so what we did was, when we entered into this space, we said, the easiest and also the biggest market which will emerge is the domestic chores. So we identified, the floor cleaning, the window cleaning, and for high net worth individuals, also the swimming pool cleaning and the lawn mowing robotic category. And later on, we added a body massaging robot for the lower back for the Indian women. And we found that in the floor space, we had the biggest takers, because this is something which nobody wants to do. Even the maid to bend, and still she will not be able to enter into every nook and corner of the home, under the bed, under the sofa, etc. So floor cleaning got the biggest acceptance. Window cleaning in the high apartment, high-rise buildings, etc. got good acceptance. But 95-98% of the market is in the top 10 cities. And also it is the nuclear families as well as the senior citizens who are adopting these products. In the industry per se, our first and the biggest successes have been with the hospitality industry and the facility management industry. So hospitality industry, immediately is able to save, say, about 30% manpower on housekeeping, 70 to 80% manpower on lawn, and
So even robots are now going and making beds?
No, not making the beds, but if a housekeeper enters into a room, 30% of the time is taken for floor cleaning. So the moment she enters, she puts the floor robot. It shows on a mobile or his mobile. Okay, it has cleaned every area. Okay, 1-2 areas because of obstruction it has not been able to go. Okay, that can be cleaned, done up very well. And in the meanwhile, that person is able to do the beds and the bathroom and the crockery and sofa or the table settings and things like that. So it's a straight 30% saving. Now, this year we are entering into the healthcare as well as the industrial segment. Government, unfortunately, Ashutosh, like in many other industries, is very averse to promoting the robots. The moment you talk about them, or even you talk to the industry associations, they say, okay, let's call it smart manufacturing, but let's not call it automation or robots, because the impression which goes is that it will, make people lose their jobs. So till the time, we do not think as a nation the possibility of the robots actually improving our competitiveness, these industries will languish. Look at Germany. If Germany today is getting back its competitiveness, it is because of the robots.
Correct.
China is realizing that Germany will get back its competitiveness until and unless they also do the robotics, has 10 years tax holiday. The way they are linking the university ideas, university professors, university labs to MSMEs and to the final go-to market is amazing. And they will protect their competitiveness. They want to be the hardware manufacturing, factory of the world. And that is the way. So they are destroying their current jobs to create new jobs and to retain their competitiveness. Until and unless India also looks at these industries in that particular way, and we have competent bureaucrats as well as competent, ministers who are ruling, this domain, you will not find.
So I was watching a
big
video
progress.
recently, talking of China, where this friend of mine was, and he had ordered room service,
Yeah.
and the entire order was delivered by a robot.
Yes.
And he opened his door, and there was a robot standing there,
Yes. It's
and he picked up whatever he had to,
Sure.
and the robot went away.
Yeah, and it's not a very difficult technology to dominate. It's
I'm sure you can
it's
do that here.
Yes, we are doing it this year. We'll do it. So we already have about 250 odd installations for our various robots across the hospitality segment. So it's happening.
Wonderful. I mean, imagine walking into a hotel here and
Yeah.
calling room service, and a machine brings
Yes.
all your food.
Yes. No,
Fascinating.
last year we had an experiment with a very large Indian hotel chain, where they wanted to have the reception completely manned by a humanoid, and maybe certain aspects which they wanted us to do were not possible because of the technology limitations. You see, even today smartphones have done so much, but battery is still a limitation. So if you want to do a lot of things in a humanoid, the battery will make it much bigger and bigger, because every kind of processing requires the energy dissipation of the battery.
Correct.
right? So, I'm, it finally did not see the light of the day
Right.
there, but we were able to develop a lot of things for them.
So a related question, these are machines.
Yeah,
How do you handle after sale service? I mean,
yeah.
are you going to be setting up a big network of service centers, or,
Yeah.
or will you have a robot coming and servicing my robot?
No, you see what has happened is that after sales service in India is a big issue, right? And neither is the Indian consumer wanting to give up on service or after sales care and say it is use and throw, even the millennials, or neither are the after sales service providers scaling up to provide that service. For companies to have offices all across the country, India is a vast geographical landscape. So it is very difficult. So what we have done is we have enabled our engineers technologically. We do not do the chip level repairs or whatever at the customer's place. We have tied up with FedEx, for example, to pick up and drop and give standby so that the customer things do not suffer. Outsourcing, we have found it very difficult because of the high technology involved, and it's like a poor hospital that somebody goes with a influenza but comes back with a kidney affected. So we have
Correct.
retained the service, but if need be, we fly our people. We place them in such a way that within 24 hours we should be able to reach our customers.
So one last question on robots before we move on.
Sure.
Uh, when is it going to happen where the robots will take over all our lives, and one fine day robots will rule the world?
It's never going to happen.
Never gonna.
Never going to happen. As I told you, I think empathy is something which, although I've been very involved and I research and I read about all the developments very carefully, I don't think the robots will ever be able to master empathy. And I personally believe that even till today, science has not fully understood the entire networks,
In the
and the neural networks which are there in our brains, in our brain. And so it will be very difficult. The ultimate word will be, with the human beings and probably the supreme power.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So moving on to some questions about you personally. Yeah, successful professional, successful entrepreneur, cutting edge technology with robotics, artificial intelligence. What is the secret of your success?
You see, okay, so I'll give you an incident which happened. I was just out of my graduation, and I had given all the examinations for MBA. My father was in the Air Force. My mother never wanted me to go into the defense because she had seen the 62 war and the 65 war and the 71 war. My mother wanted me to become a doctor. I never wanted to become a doctor, and I said I'll, go into business and become a professional. And as luck would have it, I had gone to the college to get my character certificate. Met with an accident. Was on bed for almost 3 months. Couldn't move. Had a fracture in my lumbar vertebra, and all the opportunities vanished. And in the end, it was only IMT, which was not even recognized as equivalent to MBA, and all XLRIs, universities, IIM and General Al Bajaj, all opportunities gone. It was during that point in time with I used to think that I'll be left behind, and what will I do? All my friends will go ahead. And at that point in time, the kind of books which I read and the kind of person I became was that irrespective of the starting point, or irrespective of what life delivers to you, with your hard work, there is no replacement to hard work. You can overcome. And then when I got came out of my MBA, 3 semesters out of 4 we didn't have a marketing professor. It was a new institute, and I liked marketing, and it didn't matter. And that is how I gave you the example of an Anandazar Patrika versus an Onida. And so hard work is something which has stood out for me as irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Second is that honesty, truthfulness, and wearing everything on your sleeve what you are. A simple thing. Nobody at that point of time wanted to admit that we are from IMT.
Yeah.
I've always worn IMT on my sleeve. Nobody wanted to talk about XYZ of their weaknesses. I said I'm a human being. I'm vulnerable. It doesn't matter. I may make mistakes, but I learn from those mistakes, and the ownership mindset in everything which I do. I think, and empathy. I can't overemphasize that aspect, and it was for that actually the book Corporate Blogging, came about, because as I rose up the ranks, I realized that I was losing touch with the people at the first rung of my organization, and since there was a hierarchy, okay, I used to have lunches, once in a month. Okay, I want to meet the younger guys who are joining the organization, but that was limited.
Yeah.
So I started to blog basically to get my point of view across to the younger professionals, and pass on my learnings. And so I think basically what has made me what I am is that, okay, learning is not personal. If you can share it, let's share it and make India a better place. Not just India.
So tell us a little bit about the book, Corporate Blogging.
Okay, so
This was some of your own writings to your colleagues, or?
no, this was basically about a trend which was emerging at that point in time, and this was much before the Facebooks and Twitters and the Instagrams of the world had actually revolutionized, and it was a way to communicate. It was a way to change the management or the life principles by which societies live. So I had started to blog. Sanjeev Bikhchandani was blogging at that point in time. So our two blogs were the most popular blogs at that point in time. So that book was written at a point, I think 2007 or 2008, something like that, basically to encourage more blogging in India for the people who can change societies. Role models in our society are missing, and even if people are there in very important positions today, when we look at them, we realize that, okay, this is a blind spot, or this is something which may not be an honest side of this person. So if we can bring out the role models from every aspect of society, and they start to blog and contribute to the society, nothing better than that. So that book was basically with that intention.
Very interesting. So, a question that I ask all my guests, and therefore I'm going to ask you this as well. Tell us a little bit about your learnings from your failures.
Yes. Okay. You see, every person has his own personality.
Correct.
So there may be many good things, but there are, some bad things also, which come into a person's behavior or way of working because of the success which that person enjoys. So as I achieved success, I started to take my instincts for granted. I started to believe that I know things probably better than others. And then, when I realized that, okay, it may not be the case, by, certain failures of certain initiatives or by certain feedback which I got, then I actually started to talk about it. I started to admit it in front of the people that, yes, I may not be right all the time. Of course, I am a very competitive leader that way, that if suppose my product manager will come back and say, okay, this is the thing, I will say, okay, I will also invest in my knowledge and I will challenge you next time. Basically, because a leader is supposed to find better ways. A leader is supposed to demand excellence from his or her subordinates.
Okay.
So because of that, but it is not that a leader should know everything what the other person at a slightly lesser hierarchical level should know, because that it is that person's job.
Correct.
So that is how I started to remove that chink which had come in, that okay, I know better than you because I am at a higher position than you. So we cannot. So now I don't take anything for granted.
Okay.
Even the lines of my hand, every day I see once.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So my last question.
Yeah.
Given all the experience, and you've shared a lot with us today, what would your advice be to a young startup entrepreneur or a young manager starting off his or her corporate career?
See, the only advice which I can give is never get discouraged very quickly, right? An organization does not fail us. We fail organizations. An idea doesn't fail us. We fail ideas. So if we have joined an organization as a young manager, we would have done a basic research about that organization. And if that organization is successful, and if there are so many people in that organization who are successful, why is it that we are not successful, or we are, saying that, okay, this is not the place for me. Maybe I made the wrong choice. If made the wrong choice, realize it, correct, discuss about it, find a better way. If we are doing something wrong, sometimes we may believe that, okay, I know better than my boss. Even then, organization will not recognize it until unless you become an insider and then say, okay, this is what we are doing something wrong. Same thing is for entrepreneurs. We may pass through valleys of death, right? We should not give up. Because if the idea was sound to start with, right, then we are doing something wrong to realize that idea. Right? Of course, if the idea had a lesser market potential, we should analyze. There are so many examples which are there in this world where you can pivot the idea. Correct. You can change the idea. You can course correct, right? Nothing goes a waste. An entrepreneur's journey, even if the first venture was a failure, is priceless. It is much more valuable than mediocre successes which certain professionals will achieve, or some small time entrepreneurs will achieve. So we have to have faith in ourselves, our ideas, and our organizations.
Wonderful. Rajeev, thank you very much. I think I have learned so much about robotics today, and I'm sure our audience would have learned a lot about robotics. And of course, your life, you've been very, very candid, you've been very frank. I wish you lots of success, and I sincerely hope Milagro continues to grow in the field of robotics. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It has been a big pleasure to share my journey and certain insights.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for the Brand Called You. Thank you, and see you next week.